prosperous to you all. A little bit about our transportation's mission, vision, and goals. Our mission is to provide safe, efficient, and on-time transportation services that support the equitable access to educational opportunities for all of our students. And on the day-to-day, we provide services to our general education students, approximately 2,055 students, students with IEPs. We have 1,500 students, and for field trips, we provide 2,000 trips a year for our students. The vision, the transformation of the department, the North Star of where we would like to be is SFUSD students and families experience the transportation department as one that is student-centered and responsive in providing eco-friendly transportation options that are prompt, reliable, and affordable. Our goals to achieve that vision: provide each and every student with equitable access to educational opportunities, strengthen operational efficiency, increase organizational clarity. As the board may know, we as a district do not run our own buses. We partner with school bus transportation provider First Student. The SFUSD determines who rides the bus. We design the bus routes and schedules. We provide the customer service to families. First Student provides and maintains the school buses, assuring that they're safe. They hire and train all of the bus drivers. They operate our daily routes and provide customer service to our students, families, and site professionals. On to our next slide, we see that costs have increased 38% since 2014, yet the total number of students served remain relatively stable. We see that a 20% increase in daily rates since 2014 and 15. We had a 14% increase in 2015-16. That was our new contract, and there was a jump there because the district required new buses in the fleet. Now, costs have increased. However, it's not just the base rate that has increased. We, as a district, have added 27 additional buses to 18 additional locations, 5 more SFUSD schools, and 13 more NPS schools. Later on in the presentation, we will show why we're using more buses. Now, to give you an idea and a sense of where our money is going, you'll see for the 2019-20 school year at a glance, we're spending an estimated $28 million for students with IEPs, $3.7 million for general education students, and $325,000 for field trips. There's a caveat that I'd like to add to our wonderful partners at the DCYF. They actually provide this $325,000 yearly to our school district, and these trips are free for our elementary students. So a big shout out and thank you to our DCYF partners. You'll see that in our students with IEPs, we have 205 buses. We serve 131 different schools, 1,500 students, and an average per student of $18,654 a student. In general education, we run 26 buses daily. We serve 44 schools. 4 of those schools are middle schools, the others are elementary and K through 8, serving the needs of 2,055 students approximately. And then we have an average per student cost of $1,801. So these costs are really high, and as we're going on in the slides, you'll see why some of these costs are where they're at. Here's a profile of our 1,500 students with IEPs. You'll see by grade level, sorry for the orange, it didn't come out as bright on my paper, but we roughly serve 38% of our students are in elementary and 30% in high school. When we look at the zip codes, if you look in the darker areas, you'll see in the shaded darker red, you'll see that half of our students, 50% of our students reside in the southeast part of San Francisco. And the pie chart to your right will show that half of our students are Hispanic, Pacific Islander, or African American. When we turn to our next slide, we're consistently looking at why costs are so high. And San Francisco has probably one of the most complex bell schedules around, and that really impacts costs. It increases the buses that we need daily and that are required. District-wide, we have 19 different drop-off times. 27 different pickup times, 40 schools adjust their schedules on different days of the week, 7 have a late start, not a last start, but a late start, and 33 have an early release. Prior to my arrival in the department, my understanding was that there was a rough, crude study done that estimated that if we would align these, we would roughly save $5 million if we would just align the start times in our schools. To your right, you'll see a graph and illustration that we've just designed with some of our new software that we're really excited about, and talk a little bit more about that. You'll see that this illustration is Washington High School. We have 8 morning routes and 35 students that we serve. You'll see that these routes are served with the regular end time of 3:12 in the evening, and they have 2 early release dates, and so that's really impacting us. And the programs available at Washington High School that we're serving are our SOAR program, our mild to moderate, and our moderate to severe. These programs are also available at Marshall and Mission. However, with our choice process, we have students going from the southeast side to the northeast side. So in addition to this next slide, we see how choice and unique programs and curb to curb might impact our costs. So on the left, you'll see a unique program. We have 9 morning routes for 28 students that are attending our deaf and hard of hearing program. Now, what would that look like if we had programs throughout the city and located in different areas? Or what if we had hub programs where we could have a hub bus that's stationed in a central area where the students can utilize the hub bus instead of having 9 buses running from different parts of the city serving one particular school? And on the right, something that we were just able to do just a couple of months ago, this map on the right, there's quite a clustering of students in San Francisco that are crossing each other, and there are non-public students that are attending school throughout the Bay Area as far as Morgan Hill and as far as, I consider it the border of California, Santa Rosa. And in some of those cases, we have 1 student riding on the bus. So the takeaway there on the non-public side is that we're spending $4 million a year on these 56 students. And some of the students are spending as long as 2 hours one way on a bus, which is impacting, of course, their day and their families' lives. So with all that said, I'd like to turn to my leader, my colleague, Chief Policy Operations, Orla, to take over on the next slide.
Thank you so much, Mr. Fogan. As Mr. Fogan was pointing out, there are lots of reasons why the transportation costs are so high. We don't take it lightly. It's very serious, especially when you just think of the conversation the board was just having and the update from the Special Education Community Advisory Committee and hearing from our teachers about the challenges, and to think that we're spending over $30 million a year on transportation, which over 3 years is $90 million that we're spending to transport students. And these are our highest need students, so it's important that we continue to transport them, but it's also important that we continue to find ways to do it that are more cost effective, because what we don't spend on transportation, we can spend in the classroom on our students, and that's ultimately our goal. So we have been undertaking a lot of work to try and improve our services and reduce costs. Some of the things that we've been doing are looking at, for example, how the IEPs are done and the discussions around transportation. And it used to be until last year that there was just 1 box you would check. If you got to the conversation about transportation, you would check it. And that meant that you would provide curb-to-curb transportation services to a student who needed transportation, which means you have to pick them up at their home and drop them off at school. And what we did was we changed it so that it could get more specific to the needs of the students, because in some cases, it might be the best interest of the student that they participate in general ed transportation services, or that they don't have any challenges that would make it impossible for them to go to a bus stop and be part of a hub service that they could get picked up. This is in the early stages of rolling out. We took a look at the data and just see that only about 33 IEPs have had an indication of a hub service. But that's a great start. And so what we're going to do is continue to push on that and see if there's ways that we can improve services and reduce costs by looking at different ways of providing the services. Another thing we've done is completely reimagine the process for field trips. So it was a completely paper-based, fax-based process, where teachers in schools were waiting all the time to hear back from the transportation department, can we get a bus for this particular field trip? And we've completely moved that to an electronic process, improved the efficiency of it, and reduced the costs. So right now, this time last year, today, we have scheduled 1,000 more field trips than we were able to do this time last year because of those enhancements. And we've also reduced costs. So for example, with the Symphony, it costs 70,000 less this year to take care of Symphony Day than it did the year before. So these are some of the kind of changes we're striving to make. Another huge milestone for us is starting in January, we implemented a new routing software. The Transportation Department was using software from the 1970s that had not been updated since. It wasn't integrated with Synergy. There were 5 different data systems. It made it really, really difficult for us to have a degree of confidence that we were optimizing our routes, or that we even had accurate data. Within a couple of weeks of rolling out the new software, we've been able to reduce buses by 15. That works out at like $2 million a year. So these are some of the systemic level changes that we're working towards. Another was issuing a request for proposal. And we issued a request for proposal in August. Our current contract expires at the end of this school year. And in order to create a more competitive process, we were hoping that by dividing it into 3 different scopes of work, it would help create more competition in the marketplace so that we would get better prices and improve services for students. We also wanted to add on a new option, which is to think about commercial vans. And that's for a variety of reasons. One is to support emerging needs, and some of my colleagues here today can speak to that if we want to go into that in more detail in terms of like how might a van support emerging needs of students. And we also were hoping that by splitting it up into the smaller yellow buses versus the large yellow buses, that we would have an opportunity to improve what we were offering our students at a reduced cost. We went out to bid on August 21st. For the small yellow buses, we just received 1 proposal. And for the big yellow buses, we received 2 proposals. We rejected all proposals and we plan to resolicit. And we got feedback from first student who had bid on them, and got very specific feedback on ways that we could, what they saw as some of the barriers with the RFP process that we had. So we want to go out to bid again and plan to go out to bid again for both of those services, trying to make it an even stronger RFP process to attract even more competitive solutions. For the commercial passenger vans, we received 3 proposals from 3 different companies. The process that we used was a best value proposal, so it's not as though we were going to select based on just the lowest price. Price was incredibly important and is, but so is quality. And so all of the RFPs were evaluated as a best value procurement, which considers price and quality. And best value points were awarded across a number of criteria. One was prior relevant experience, including a track record of safety. Student safety is the most paramount important. Nothing matters if our students aren't safe. It's the #1 thing. We also evaluated based on commitment to newer and sustainable vehicles, staffing proposals, and approach to customer service. For those 3 proposals, which we used all of the board's guidelines and state and federal guidelines around public procurement, it was monitored by and supported by our legal department, our purchasing department, and our chief financial officer. We had a cross-section of staff from different departments help review and evaluate. We didn't even open the prices until after we had looked at the best value score. The company that was determined to be the best value is Zoom Services. Now, in prior board meetings, there have been comments and questions about, is Zoom safe? So I want to kind of speak to that for a moment. So, as I said, safety is utmost important. All drivers, regardless of the vehicle type, must go through the same fingerprinting and background checks that any staff who interact with students have to go through. All vehicles provided must comply with all federal and California standards regarding transportation safety. I'd never recommend going to a contract with any company that I thought in any way would compromise the safety of our students. We currently use Zoom for several programs, for some programs. They have an excellent track record of student safety. Over 200 school districts and 4,000 schools in California currently use Zoom as well, including Jefferson Union High School District, Oakland Unified, San Jose Unified, San Rafael, Mount Diablo Unified. Zoom's requirements for drivers include that they must have 3 years of caregiving experience. They must be registered with Trustline and Department of Social Services in California. They must have live scan, fingerprinting background checks against the FBI, the DOJ, and the State Global Watch and Sex Offender Database. And they must participate in safety expert training. In 2009, Zoom performed services for SFUSD's shoestring program as follows. They completed over 835 rides for 18 at-risk students. And 95% of Zoom drivers for the shoestring program have a 5-star rating. They also have an app so that when a parent gets something that's not available on the other services, you can see where the car is and monitor it. We also have, with First Student, incredible safety record. And the only reason I'm highlighting here Zoom is because that has been raised in conversation before. We're also recommending First Student, and their drivers do a phenomenal job of supporting our students and our families. So I'm not highlighting this about Zoom to suggest anything other than excellence for First Student, but just wanted to be responsive to the board since this is something that's been raised in public comment before with regard to Zoom. So we've talked, and as the district and everyone on the board knows, we have a huge budget crisis ahead of us, and all departments in every area are being asked to find ways that we can reduce services. Some of the strategies I talked about earlier this evening about what we're doing to try to improve services and reduce costs, we are hoping that by the end of this school year, we will spend $500,000 less than budgeted, and maybe more if we keep working on the strategies that we're working with. I want to say that also First Student has been a great partner and is committed to finding ways to create more efficiency, and that is a conversation we have with leadership at First Student all the time. We cannot continue to spend this much money to transport this many students. It's just not a viable option. And the only way we can do it is to reduce the number of buses that we're using to support such a small number of students. If we're supporting more students, that's great. And maybe that's a direction ultimately we might want to go to, have a larger number of students that are being transported. But to transport 1,500 students for $28 million is just not sustainable. And First Student are in agreement with that and in conversation with us and have offered to help us find even more ways to optimize our routes and schedules. We also think it's really important that we start exploring these hub routes and that we continue to strengthen the process for the transportation part of the conversation when it comes to the IEPs. And that requires and involves strong partnership with our special education team members, and transportation and special education are working very closely together on that. We want to pilot van services for emerging needs, but also to think about some of our current needs. Are we providing them in the most cost-effective way possible and the most the best way for our students? So, for example, we have currently got high school students that are participating in internships, and we don't have transportation services that we're able to offer them, like having car service or van service to be able to support that throughout the day is part of what we're committed to doing with having a contract with van service. We also recognize that, in some cases our students are to and from school on Yellow Bus, but then during the day they have to be taken out in order to receive therapy services at another site because it's not available at their school. Instead of having a bus do that, have a van do that. We've got a number of children, we're spending over $500,000 a year on students who are older than 18, who need support to get to the CAP program. And we're also trying to help them build skills for life and transition into real world. Something like a van service is going to be much more aligned with their real life experience than a Yellow Bus. So these are the kinds of things that we want to pilot with Zoom. And you can see that we're requesting a $30 million contract with First Student. We're still contemplating that our services will be Yellow Bus, and we want to pilot for van service emerging needs and find ways to reduce it. So our assumption of reducing the budget by about $2 million next year for transportation is a combination of all of these things. And we also think, as we're looking at our student assignment, that we really need to audit our general education routes and services. I know it's a small slice of the larger pie that we're spending on transportation, but we need to audit that and align to make sure that it's meeting our policy goals. And we want to explore ways to standardize our bell schedules, and we're starting conversations on that, and then getting ready to issue a new RFP, and by August. So these are the steps that staff is taking to help reduce transportation costs and improve services. And we thank the board for the opportunity to share this tonight, and we look forward to answering any questions.
Thank you. And we have a number of people signed up for public comment. Call your name, please approach the podium. Paul Stein, Bill Hill, Shane Hawk, Ben Clark, Sharon Klein, Graham Norris, and Susan Todd.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm trying to be quick. I have a lot to say. I applaud you, the staff, for making things more efficient, but we have concerns about safety and about our jobs. So I'll get right to some questions I think you should know before you make your decisions. Starting with, will Zoom services be hiring independent contractors, or will they be employees of Zoom, particularly in light of the recent court rulings that Uber's drivers are employees under AB 5 that happened yesterday? If they're employees, will they be allowed to be unionized? The RFP called for competitive wages for drivers under Scope 3, and how do you determine that? Will they get benefits? Zoom's website says they pay between $16 and $35 an hour with no benefits of any kind. How can a unionized company compete with a high-tech exploitation of the workforce by a ride-sharing company, at least as I see it? Who will maintain the vehicles? Who will own the vehicles? Will it be drivers, as the website says, or is there a new kind of business model that we're not aware of? If the drivers own the vehicles, are they going to be responsible for the technology that's required to be placed in these? The removable tablets, the 5 cameras, the Samsara hookups and GPS tracking and digital radios, etc. The scope of the work called for light-duty vehicles. Will they be vans, cars, SUVs? Will they be wheelchair service? Will the drivers be required to be commercial drivers? If they're not commercial drivers, will they be drug tested randomly? Will they have their hours of service monitored as commercial drivers do? Who arranges for the pickups by the Zoom? Is the parent or the district? Are they automatically recurring routes every day? And I guess I'm cut off. Thank you for listening.
Good evening, board members. My name is Graham Norris. I'm a 14-year school bus driver. And I would like to request that the board consider separating the vote to approve the contract with First Student from the vote to approve the contract with Zoom. These two contracts involve two drastically different types of companies, and each entity should be considered separately on their own merits, not combined into a single vote with the choice being to approve both contracts or neither. First Student contract is for a 1-year extension of the vast majority of the student transportation. This contract requires certified commercial school bus drivers and certified school buses. First Student employs union drivers who receive decent pay and benefits packages. Even under these circumstances, many of our drivers have to live far away due to the high cost of living. Zoom is a rideshare company which mostly hires non-employee independent contract drivers with non-commercial licenses, similar to the business model used by Uber. As has been mentioned, these drivers generally receive little to no benefits or labor protections and cannot join unions. These drivers also have to use and maintain their own personal vehicles to transport school children. Also, misclassifying these drivers as independent contractors is most likely illegal. Just yesterday, a federal judge denied Uber's attempt to get an injunction against AB 5. Combining these two contracts into a single vote is highly inappropriate and unnecessary. I kindly request that the board take the necessary step to consider these contracts separately and vote on these two contracts separately as well. Appreciate your time.
Good evening, Commissioners. I am Meg Phelps and have been driving SFUSD children in a yellow school bus for the last 34 years. I would like to speak about the district's plan to contract with Zoom, a company that it appears will be utilizing light-duty vehicles, otherwise known as passenger cars, for transporting school children, including home-to-school transportation, instead of using school buses. The proposed contract with Zoom also states that the district expects to be transporting students with IEPs and to expand this service. The school bus industry is entirely based on safety, down to the color of the yellow bus, which was chosen after studies showed it had the highest visibility in low light conditions. All the laws, regulations, multiple agency oversight, extensive vehicle inspections, extensive driver monitoring and training are put in place to ensure that school buses and those who drive them provide the safest transportation for school children, and the system works well. When the district proposes to use standard passenger cars, the extensive safety oversight, regulations, and legal requirements for school buses and school bus drivers are thrown out the window and do not apply. A standard passenger car cannot legally stop traffic so that cars wait for children to board. A standard passenger car is not recognized as a vehicle transporting small children, and that extra care should be taken. A standard driver has nowhere near the level of training and continuing scrutiny that a certified school bus driver has. I feel the use of standard passenger cars will set a dangerous precedent, especially if the use of these vehicles continues to increase in place of school buses. San Francisco is a very congested, difficult, and hazardous city to drive in. The use of regular cars and non-commercial drivers will endanger children. I ask the board to reconsider this decision. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Gail Flynn. I'm a state certified instructor for school bus drivers and a school bus driver with 19 years driving for San Francisco Unified. I would like to address this issue around safety and training with Zoom drivers as compared to school bus drivers. On Zoom's website, they say that the Zoom drivers undergo some safe school training courses with a company called Vector Solutions. It appears that this is an online course. We do not know that what this training involves, nor how many hours the course is, but what we do know is that the CHP and the California Department of Education requires our drivers to go through what they require our drivers to go through to become certified school bus drivers. That's 40 hours of classroom and behind the wheel training. That's just for starters. The applicants have to attend classes in person and prove that they're the person who's applying for certification. The training has to be logged on a form and verified by the CHP. The applicant then has to take a written exam in the presence of the CHP coordinator. They cannot leave the room. Then they have to pass a 2-hour-long drive test with the CHP officer. Every year after that, the drivers are required by law to attend in person 10 hours of safe driving classes. This attendance is documented on a legal form, the TO1. The driver will lose their school bus certificate if they don't complete this yearly training. The school bus certificate must be renewed every 5 years to remain valid. This renewal requires the driver to repeat all the original requirements: written test, drive test with the CHP. This is what is required of a driver to get a school bus certificate and to retain their certification. We doubt that the Zoom training is anywhere near the training required to get a school bus certificate and to keep it. The CHP oversees all the training and verifies its compliance. Nothing less should be required of those tasked with the safe transportation of school children. Then there's a serious issue around safety training. Are Zoom vehicles really prepared to transport our San Francisco children safely in these Zoom van cars? I highly doubt it. School buses are the safest mode of transportation for children. That's a proven fact. We've never had a child fatality driving San Francisco Unified children in school buses. With San Francisco being one of the most challenging cities to drive in the U.S., Zoom vehicles and drivers are not up to the task of transporting our San Francisco children safely. It'll be a crime and so unfortunate if a child has to die in a Zoom vehicle before you realize that they are safer in a school bus. Thank you.
My name is Shane Hoff, and I've been a San Francisco school bus driver for 24 years. Our union is SMART 1741. We've been before this body many, many times over the last few months, citing the safety features of the school bus, features that have been developed over decades. Features like superior rollover protection and high crush standards. steel reinforced sides, which are developed specifically to keep its occupants alive in any high-impact collision. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration on their website states, and I quote, "Students are about 70 times more likely to get to school safely when taking a school bus instead of traveling by car. School buses are designed to be safer than passenger vehicles in preventing crashes and injuries." That's end of quote. Our concern is that district transportation is embarking on a course to gradually replace school buses with less safe passenger vehicles and other light-duty vehicles, and in the process, circumventing using certified school bus drivers to drive them. The contract under consideration tonight of scope of work 3 stated an intention to use these vehicles home to school. We are concerned, is this the direction transportation is taking or intends to take in the future? We have said it before, but we have 45 years under our union contract, and we've not had one single child fatality in our buses or by our buses. Millions of, maybe billions of miles traveled. Does the school district want to keep this record? Or is it going to pursue the course of these much less safe vehicles and less qualified drivers in order to save money?
Good evening, Susan Solomon again, United Educators of San Francisco. I am rising in support of these very experienced school bus drivers who are members of a union. And that means, we have often talked about, as UESF, how the best way to support our students is to support the people who work with them. And these are individuals who have years of experience. They've described the safety features that are an everyday part of their jobs and their vehicles. And we should value the adults who are with our students, just as we value our students who they take care of. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, if you know this, comment, you have any questions?
Thank you for the presentation and for everyone that come on to speak. Is there a representative representing you? Is there a representative from Zoom? How long have you had a contract with Zoom? This first year or second year? Going to this.
Yeah, this is our first year. Yeah, that's for the shoestring program.
We're about to, we're not trying to work with them, we're trying to sort of contract.
Oh, sorry. We do have a contract currently with Zoom where we transport 18 students